Welcome to the Penga Folder podcast with your host, Nana and Emily. They invest remotely in the UK and live in Sweden. In this podcast, they will be interviewing interesting guests that all invest in the UK property market.
Hi, Harvey. How is it?
I'm fantastic, thanks. And you?
I'm good. Welcome to the Penga Folder podcast. So,
thank you for having me. I'm very honoured.
Since the pandemic, I've been seeing your post, and I think we've spoken as well. I like the thing that you're doing, the remote. Me, myself, and my missus, we operate remotely because we live in Sweden, and the listeners is also from, they're all from the whole world, around the world. So I thought this podcast with you would be good, that you can give us and the listeners some tips and how you do it. So maybe if you could tell, who is Harvey?
So, fantastic. So I'm Harvey. I'm a remote property investor. I'm a investor. I'm a dad. I'm a husband, proud dad of a 3-year-old son. And my one-line mission statement is to help people live on their own terms via property, either from portfolio building or coaching. So I coach people on growth portfolios, and I feel everybody should be heading towards a life of living on their terms, and the world today has transformed, and COVID is making a lot more people wake up to it. But everything you can do in person can be done virtually. You're in Sweden, I'm having a conversation with you face to face. So it's just a mindset for people. More like people say to me, what's the biggest challenge with remote investing? Of course, there's challenges. There's challenges in every business you'll do. There's no one business out there that you get some sort of level of challenge in. But the biggest challenge I find people have is the mindset of it. They think, how can I do that? It's far away. It's not where I live. So, but that's in a nutshell. I'm a remote property investor and a coach.
And how do you stumble up on property investing?
So, I'm not fully sure. So from the age like I'm showing my age now. This is pre-internet phenomenons, and be fair, back then the remote stuff probably didn't work as well and wouldn't have worked as well. But I used to always pick up the local Gazette, local newspaper, and always looking at middle pages of the properties and just trail through them. And my granddad planted the seed as well. He used to always say, because he was a home owner. He was of that generation. He wanted to own his own home. He was. He's a mixed race. My dad's from the Caribbean. My mum's white English, and the white English side, my granddad, that side, he was a veteran of World War II, and he always wanted to be a homeowner. So he used to always say to me, "Money's in bricks and mortar." He was just an employee type mindset. He went and they had work, they worked, but I always kept on looking at him. So I think that's where the seed initially got planted. And then I remember one day I could come. Funny enough, it was my nan and granddad's house got inherited to my mum, and my mum put my name on the deeds straight away. She said, "Okay, I want you to be the executor." Although I'm the youngest of my siblings, she said, "I want you to be the executor of this, but also for tax implications and passing it over." It just made it easy to put my name on it from when she transferred it into her name, rather than go through that implications going forward. So for tax reasons, we've done that. And then one day I said to her, "Look, do you mind if I loan against the house? My name's on it. I want to buy myself a house. So buy a house for my personal self." And I was with a girl at the time that I didn't massively get along with as well. And it's crazy, you had these notions. You think you're not living together at the moment. Maybe if we live together, we might get along. But obviously that wasn't my greatest thinking. But I literally offered on a house, pulled out of it. Offered on a second house, we was going to move in together, and it got to the day of exchange of contracts, which I feel massively bad for. But on the day of contracts, something deep down in me said, "Don't do this. What are you doing?" One, I was with the wrong girl. What am I doing moving in with the wrong girl? And two, I always had that dream from that seed, from reading that Gazette from a young age. I had that seed there about getting into property. And I was thinking, wow, I had around 20k myself, and I financed out a large lump of money from my mother's house. And I was like, and this is before any education, before I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, before I understood anything around this. But I was like, wow, I'm gonna just tie myself to a massive mortgage, and I'm never gonna be able to save the same, you know, because the mortgage I'm going to pay on my mum's house and the mortgage I'm going to pay on this new house, this is probably my window of opportunity if I want to do this nearly gone, because I'm not going to be able to save as good, and I'm not going to have loads of properties that I'm going to be able to loan against again, you know. So I pulled out the house the day of exchange of contracts, much to the estate agent's anger. And I was like, look, apologies, and I can't make myself right for what I'm doing, but I can't do something if it's not right. And I should have thought this through better first. Apologise, but I'm not doing it. He tried to pressure me into it, but it was a straight no. I got into property, but I think I watched a bit of Homes Under the Hammer at the time, and like many people, I bought, not like many people, but I had ambitions of being this big property developer without any education, zero education. Hadn't read a book at that point. I left school dyslexic, by the way, and didn't read my first book until around this time, and it was very difficult to read it, and it took me years to learn myself to read. I'm still not a great reader, although I read a lot. I'm not a great reader, especially for the volume I read. But we pulled out of the house, and on the day, as I said, on the day of exchange, I pretty much split up with my girlfriend a little bit after that, and then I went to auction because I was watching Home Under the Hammer, and I bought a piece of land thinking that, yeah, I want to be a property developer, but my ambition and my ambition way outweighed my skill at the time, and way outweighed my actual conviction and courage to actually convict what I was what I want to do. Because once I got the land, I literally went, and I learned a lot from this, by the way, as well. They done a thing called bouncing the bids off the wall. So he went, the land was bought for £30,000. He went 30,000. Nobody, 29 and a half, 29. Oh yeah, 29 and a half. I put my hand up at 30, really quick. This happened. He went 30, yeah, done. Boom, hammer went down. Later on, I sold it to the same auctioneer, and he told me the trick they used to bounce the bids off the wall to get the bids going. And I realised that's what you've done to me, you know. Like, and I sold it at quite a loss as well. So yeah, when I actually putting my hand up was very different from actually putting the action steps in place to actually develop this out. And I realized I lost lots and lots of money on it. I took some action and I learned a lot. We went through the planning stage, and we got stuck in a bit of planning, and yeah, I got as far as getting architectural drawings, but I didn't push it as well as I could have maybe. But also my experience was I was punching above my weight far too much. So then I bought my first buy-to-let property, which was, as I explained to you before, I was born in Stratford, but from the age of 6, I grew up in a little village called Aveley, still on the inside of the M25. So, but it's the first part of Essex. So the next town up from that is Greater London. But even then, with zero education, I knew in this little village, I knew investing in this village just didn't work. There wasn't enough houses there. The prices was way too high. The return, although I didn't even know fully what a return was when I was buying my first properties, that's how much I just dived in and worked out later. But I just knew it just didn't work there. There was no major employers. So I thought, okay, let's go just a little bit further out. And I didn't come into London, although in hindsight, I wish I had, because I would have been able to afford to buy then, and the capital growth would have been phenomenal. But hindsight's beautiful, and nobody knows that afterwards. But I went to a place called Southend, which was within 1 hour. And this is the general rule that people say to you. People say, invest within an hour from where you live or where you live. So the strategical advantage of me investing where I live was zero, because you couldn't invest in this little village. And I grew up in there from the age of 6. I knew all the streets inside out. So my knowledge of the streets inside out was zero, because it wasn't an investment location. So then I went to Southend, which was 50 minutes away. And the strategical advantage of investing there was still zero, because I didn't know Southend, even though it is within a drive away. I didn't know it. And it turned out I bought that house. I bought my second house, and then I bumped into a guy from the north. And then I went and done some training. And didn't do some training, sorry. I bought 3 houses up north. So I learned how to buy refurbished with mortgage. I went online. I come across a guy called AJ who was talking about other people's money, using banks' money, private investment. So I mastered this strategy and started learning. And I'd got to one piece of land and 5 houses, so 3 in the north and 2 in the south. And then I opened a coffee shop and got very sidetracked, thinking, okay, these northern properties are great. Like, I bought refurbished, refinanced all my money out of them pretty much. The barrier to entry was really low. The returns were really high. So I thought, I'm going to buy hundreds of these. And I got sidetracked on a coffee shop. I see this coffee shop. I got that shiny penny syndrome, like lots of entrepreneurs. I thought, let me open this coffee shop, and then the profits from that can be fed into buying more properties up north. But it done completely the opposite. I didn't have no desire of the coffee shop apart from earning me some money. And as a result, because I didn't have no desire in that as well, I made all the classic mistakes. I put my nephew in there. I hired a lady to run it, who was my friend's mate, who had experience in that field, but she just didn't want to run it. He wanted us to run it. She didn't want him to run it. And it turned out on day one, I remember when we was going to I've got the business mind, so I was excited about getting the suppliers, and it was all organic, all local suppliers. And when I went to get the coffee machine, she was like, "You should be paying attention to this." I was like, "No, that's going to be your part. I'm going to pay attention to thinking about what deals and what stuff to do." And she was right. I should have paid attention to it, because on day two, she gave up on day one. So on day two, I found myself in the coffee shop with my phone, Googling, how do I make a cappuccino? Because I didn't have a clue what to do. Lo and behold, that took me further from my property dream than it was bringing me closer. It took another nearly 2 years before I bought another property again, and put me in a massive financial hole, and a massive mental hole as well, like really got close to burning me out. So at this time, I went to Progressive Properties, multiple streams of property income, and thought, you know what, I want to get back into property. Let's go there. And I went there, and all of the trainers were saying only invest within an hour. So I thought I'd got this wrong. But then I learned how to do JVs and learned a bit more. But I just thought, I must have this wrong. So I went off. A few things happened in between, but I went off and I got a HMO local to home with a joint venture partner. But I was also thinking, how do I, like, raising that amount of capital, even with other people's money, is very difficult, especially with, I only had 5 property deals before that. I was thinking, like, this is very difficult. And also I realized HMOs, yeah, they do earn more money, but there's a trade-off for that extra money. There's a lot more management, a lot more regulation, a lot more planning and working with environmental officers and planners. And they shut it was a 6-bedroom, they shut one of the rooms down, tried to make us go into a 4-bedroom. And I was like, wow, this is a lot more complicated than these little houses that I'd spend £2,000 or £3,000 on, rent them out and just have a long-term tenant. And like, everybody's craves passive income. I'm not sure there's such a thing as a full passive income. You've always got to have a managed income. Even if you've got an online product that's automated, you've got to still manage the software that does that. You've got to manage the letting agent that manages your properties. If you hire a manager or hire a team, you've got to manage them. Richard Branson's on the board of all of these companies, although he don't run the day-to-day of it. But everybody talks about passive income. So the most passive form of property income is 100% single let family homes. You get the longest term tenants and the lowest turnover. But yeah, long story short was, I thought, okay, I have to come back home. I got this HMO and realised, wow, these ain't for me, and raising that money. And I realised, and around the same time, that first apartment I bought in Southend, I didn't realise at the same time, but a tenant moved out and we moved a second person in. This was giving me the penny drop of remote investing. I was like, wow, she phoned up, and the first words I had from my second tenant in my first property I bought was, there's prostitutes walking outside my house. And basically, long story short of it was, I bought the property. The agent went to me, yeah, it's fine. It'd be great for rentals. Fine. I moved my friend in, which was quite lucky, because I think he secretly liked these ladies of the nights walking past the flat every night. But it turned out it was right in the middle of a red light district, and 4 doors up was a drug rehabilitation centre. And this red light district wasn't a red light district like Amsterdam, really cool and trendy tourist place. This was like heroin and crack addicts that walked the street at night for their fix, and in the morning they was turning up 4 doors away from me to get their medication and their rehabilitation. So this really dropped the penny for me to say, I didn't know Southend any better than I knew Stockton-on-Tees, which was 4 hours away. But in fact, I knew Stockton-on-Tees a hell of a lot better, because I've met a guy from there. He'd moved down and we started playing golf. We had 70 properties in the area. He had several businesses. And because he didn't know nobody where I lived, it was chance. I knew the girl we met to move down here. So we just got friends. He guided me in the area. He told me the bad streets, the good streets. Because, of course, there's streets like that and maybe worse than that in Stockton-on-Tees. But he was my guiding point. And that's when the penny dropped. I was like, wow, I don't want to be doing these bigger projects at the moment, the HMOs and the complications that come with that. I like the single lets. Yeah, of course it can be done remotely. And that's what made me realise, and that was about 6 years ago, I thought, right, I'm really going to go at this, figuring out how to make this fully online to be able to do this. I do visit there, but be able to run it online, basically.
Yeah. So that leads me into my question. Why the Northeast? I know you met this guy, but why?
Yeah, so I've picked the Northeast it picked me sort of thing because I met him. It met my price barrier. Similar again, I say to people, strategical advantage for me to invest where I grew up and knew the streets was zero because the properties were too expensive, the yields were too low. Strategical advantage within an hour is still going to be, if you live in London and you've only got 30k to invest, the strategical advantage is zero because you can't afford the deposit. And you could go into rent to rent, but that's not investing. Rent to rent is just managing properties for people. It's not property investing. You're not building wealth through assets. It's a good strategy. I'm not knocking rent to rent, by the way, but it's a very different thing from investing. So similar then, I'd run at much. So the second house I bought, I learned the buy, refurbish, remortgage strategy. This was in the south. The second, the actual house, I bought the land, the flat, and the house. I then learned buy, refurbish, remortgage. And I'd started off with an 80-odd K pot, and back then houses was cheaper then. Those were still around 100k to buy, but I started off with around an 80k pot. I bought two deals, and I was nearly out of money. I then had the bank phone me up, and I'm not recommending anybody do this, by the way, because you're not allowed to do this. I was comfortable to do it because I knew I could pay the bank loan back, and I was comfortable going to a grey area. But the bank phoned me up one day and went, "We've got a loan for you. Would you like it for £25,000?" I was like, wow, I'll just run out. That's probably just enough to get my next house. So I said, yeah, of course I'd like it. In that tone, quite laughing. And like you're doing now, the guy on the end of the phone laughed with me. He's like, "What do you want it for?" I said, "I'd buy a house with it." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Yeah, I'll buy a house from a portfolio." Although I only had one house and one piece of land, I was already calling it a portfolio. I didn't know anything about mindset and priming your mind at that stage. So I was just doing that natural. I was faking it till I make it, I guess. But he was like, the guy was like, "Look, if you said it was for a car or a kitchen for your own home, we could lend you the money, but we can't do it for business purposes." And I laughed, and he laughed, and he went, "And I can't even give you it like now if you say that because his calls are recorded." He said, "But I'll tell you what I can do. I can call you back." I knew exactly what he meant. I said, "Okay, I'll call you back." I hung the phone up, and literally within a second, the phone's rung. "Hello, it's the bank here. Would you like a loan?" "Yes, I would." "How much would you like?" £25,000. "What would you like it for?" "I would like a new car." As I said, you're not allowed to do this, guys. It's very much more difficult to do this today. I'm not commending anybody to do it, but I knew I could cover that loan. I knew if my investment went, I could pay that loan back. So I felt I didn't lose sleep over it, you know. So I got that loan. I got my second property and learned how to buy a refurbished mortgage on the second one. So I bought it and I put 40-odd K into it at the time. The deposits was higher because it was still in the last recession time, coming out of the last recession. So I bought it, I put 40-odd K into this deal and I managed to refinance that 11K. And I was thinking to myself, I didn't know so much about other people's money then at that stage, a little bit. But I'm thinking, I'm not going to get the bank keep on ringing me up all the time to replenish my deposits. And I only had 11K. So then just the price took me to that area. I met this guy. I could afford my next deposit in that area. And I was like, okay, look, I've got a contact there. And yeah, I just took the plunge. But that said, if I've reverse engineered what I've done now to help the people I coach. So if I was going to pick an area, there would be different elements involved with it. First of all, you've got to look at how much you can afford. So in the UK, a lot of people are thinking of Manchester because it's really a hot location, got a lot of capital growth at the moment, but the houses are 150. Similar again, if you only got 20K, then how can you buy that? You've not got enough money for it, you know? So you've got to look what you can afford. Look and see if you know anybody in the location. If you don't, then just look at what you can afford and what is geographically the closest to you within your price range, what meets the general fundamentals of property.
Okay. So what tenant type do you get in the Northeast?
So, contrary to popular belief, there's every major town and major cities, all the cities around the UK have got micro economy. So even in Stockton-on-Tees, there's rich places there, believe it or not. There is people with wealth and money. So so there's a micro economy within this macro area, but as a general, the Northeast don't perform well. But there's little micro pockets that you get professional tenants and higher end tenants. I purposely go for what I call high end housing benefits or low income workers, purely because these are the most longest term tenants. You give the highest odds for longest term tenants. It's not guaranteed, but gives you the best probability to get a long-term tenant. And especially if you're doing it far away, you don't want a high turnover where you're checking people in and out all the time. You want something that's going to give you real good chance of having a long-term tenant. So the reason I go for this tenant profile, this avatar of my tenants, is because if they've got low income, they don't save up for a deposit. Or if they're on housing benefits, as I said, high-end housing benefits, I work with some supported living providers, but they manage the tenants themselves. But in general, if I'm going to manage it, I usually look at mums. I like family homes and families. They stay there the longest. Flats, people either meet a girlfriend or boyfriend and they upgrade, or they have a kid and they upgrade. So flats are not usually a long-term option for most people. Some people it is, but most it's not. So I go for mums that have had kids but can't afford the childcare and go back to work. Yeah. They want to cancel home, they can't afford to buy a home. So they're decent people, and these are great tenants. And their nan lives 2 streets up, their mum lives across the road. So they because of their support and their network, they're going to stay there. As long as you look after them, you do that house up nice, you're going to get a long-term tenant out of them. Similar again, low-income workers, they ain't saving up deposits. So again, as long as the house is done nice, they want a council home, they can't get a council home because the council ain't got enough stock. You keep them as long-term tenants. In my area, also the yield is really good there. I don't want to go for like tenants have got some challenges in life. Maybe they're like got drug problems or alcohol problems. It's too much to manage and too much hassle to manage, and your house is getting wrecked and things like that. So I go for that profile. But like for instance, the profile, the typical property I'll buy is like 60, 70k. Buy some a little bit cheaper sometimes. Buy some a little bit more. But I do buy some at 100k to diversify my portfolio, because in that bracket in the northeast, in my area, there is little bits of capital growth with them, and you get a different profile. You could sell the houses a lot easier, and that, so it's nice to have a bit of a diversification. But the difference is these 100 to 150k houses would rent for £600-700 a month. The 60k houses will rent for £550 a month. So the yield really gets shrunk out of them. You give a professional tenant, the yield's still good on these houses. So I buy up to about 100k. The yield's still good, but nowhere near as good as a 60k house. So the yield's still good, but the thing you get is, because the rent's so low, and the average wage in my area is still £26,000. So these professional tenants, if their rent's only £600 a month, they can quite easily save up a 10% deposit and buy a house for £120,000 themselves. So within a year to 2 years, they've saved up the deposit and they're moving house. So you get a higher turnover of the professional tenants. So my profile is these tenants that are on higher benefits or low income. But also, if someone loses their job, the house can be fully covered by benefits as well, because the benefit rates cover that, because that's a typical style property I buy.
Okay, that's really smart. So why do you think that the Northeast have a bad name then?
Because there's not as much employment now. There is some really desolate places, but again, it's like anything. You can go in London, and there's some really rough and desolate places. It's about educating yourself. So as a whole, the Northeast hasn't grown. As a whole, there is micro pockets that have, even in my town there has, but as a whole it's not grown, and there's not as much employment now. And when there's not as much employment, it attracts the lower demographic, and lower employment or no employment does generally attract a little bit more crime and things like that. But again, there are micro pockets within these areas. There's more micro pockets of them within these areas than there would be in the south. As I said, you still got these in London. So there's more increased version of them, but not everywhere is like that. So it's just about your due diligence. So if you can research your area correctly, the problem that people get, and this is what gives it a bad name, is people go up there and they see properties for 20 grand, £15,000. I remember that guy, I'd done the same. I met that guy from the area. I asked him out for lunch, and I said to him, wow, I've seen properties for 15 grand, 10 grand. And he was like, seriously, don't buy them. He said, you're just going to buy yourself a headache. He said, and problems. So he guided me. And the problem is, a belief is just a belief. A belief system, when you look at it on a scientific level, is a bunch of neurons in your head that's wired together so many times it's formulated a belief. We don't know if it's true or not. It's just our beliefs. So a lot of these beliefs gets formed from somebody who'll go to North and they'll buy a property for 10 grand, and they get massive amounts of problems with it, with alcoholics in it, drug users in it, prostitutes in it. And they say the North don't work. But they're basing it on their belief because they bought wrong. I could say HMO don't work because I've managed my first HMO wrong. It wasn't the HMO didn't work, it's because I didn't implement the strategy correctly. So many people get seduced from the cheap properties, myself included, when I first went there. You think, oh, wow. And you start making, like, your brain releases all these endorphins thinking, wow, I can rent it to the housing benefits for £500 a month and I can buy it for 10 grand. You start thinking, yeah, of course it'll work. And you persuade yourself it will, even though you're seeing warning signs. And it's beyond your conscious level of thinking. So many people go there, do this, have a bad experience, and then tell everybody about their bad experience, and people judge that bad experience as being gospel. So I could tell you 2 things. I managed my properties wrongly, first of all, because I was so busy buying properties, I wasn't concentrating on the management side. And I hired a team and I wasn't concentrating on system. My literally hiring process was, here you go, here's a laptop, get on with it. And I read loads of books, so I knew what to do, but I didn't have the systems for them to implement it. So we got into massive amounts of problems with the management. I had one stage, I had 7 properties empty, a load of bad tenants, properties wrecked. And I was like, did I make the right decision? Fast forward today with the right education, the right management now. So we getting ourselves the right education, the right implementation of that education, because knowing and doing is 2 different things. So the right discipline and the implementation of that education, my portfolio performs well. So that's the same portfolio. So 2017, I could have told you the story if it don't work in the north, it's crap, all the tenants are crap, rubbish. Or today or last year in 2020, when a time you expect it to be poor, I was saying, yes, it's performing really well. So yeah, I think so many people go there, get seduced by the cheap properties, and then judge it on that and just not implement the strategy correctly.
Yeah. Okay. So what strategies work in the Northeast then?
The buy, refurbish, remortgage strategy is fantastic. So again, so many people, the ability to refinance you recycle your money is fantastic. If you go to Manchester, that strategy don't work so well. You go in the south, it don't work so well, because what you need to buy discounted properties is motivated sellers. So if you're in a growth market where the property prices are going up really quick, who wants to sell their property for 20% below what it's worth? Nobody. You can put it on the 5% below the market value and it'll get snapped up because the market's so buoyant, it's an undersupply of stock. So this is the pros and cons. When I'm coaching people, I say to them, look, if you want capital growth, don't go to the Northeast in general. Go to Manchester and Liverpool. But the trade-off for that is you're not going to find so many deals. So you're not going to be able to buy, refurbish, remortgage so easily. You'll find motivated sellers in every market, in London, everywhere, but you find less of them. So this is, as a generalized rule, the Northeast will have a lot more motivated sellers because it's not such a buoyant market. So the market's not growing and the sales ain't so hot. People get much more motivated. It gives you the opportunity to buy it and add your value into it. And I say there's 2 lots of equity gains. You can either gain equity from capital appreciation, or you can gain equity from adding the appreciation, so forcing the appreciation. So you can do work to it and force it. So for me, people say to me, what about the growth in the south and you're going to miss that? I say, okay, let's take an example, 300k property bought in a town just in Southend where I first bought a property. If I bought that property for 300k, it probably cost me, with a deposit, stamp duty and everything, probably the best part of 100k. I might not be able to refinance that because of the stress test on the rent multiplier, and I might not have got a big enough discount. I might have got a 10% discount on that because they're harder to find motivated sellers. So I've tied up 100k. Let's say it grew 10% for 3 years. I've got £90,000, which is fantastic. I've got property in the south as well, by the way. So I've had that sort of growth. And yeah, brilliant. That's if it grew 10%, which is really ambitious. But let's say it did. Let's now say I take that same 100k and I go into the Northeast where I invest. I could buy 5 properties in a period of 6 months, maybe a year. And with each one of them properties, I've forced the appreciation up by £20,000 each. I've got £100,000 in 6 months. What I've waited for and hoped that the market's going to carry on growing within what I've waited and hoped within 3 years. Also, I can then lend against that forced appreciation because the rents do work and the safety's there to do that. I can then lend against that and keep on buying. So again, it depends what the end goal of somebody they want out of it. If they've got a busy business, they don't want to build it as a business. Maybe buying the odd house and just getting capital appreciation is fine. But if you want to build it as a property business, without a shadow of a doubt, the foundation of all good property businesses is single let properties. And the only place you can do that is in these areas where you've got high yields, low purchase price properties. And if you, unless you're fortunate enough to live in one of these locations, you have to think about doing that remotely. But it's more than accessible today.
Yeah. So that leads me into my following question. Do you put repayment mortgage because of like you mentioned, the capital growth is very low there, or if it's even going to come some capital growth, or do you just because you buy it so cheaply, like you said, you either add value or force the appreciation? How do you do?
Yeah, great question. So it depends where you are in your journey. I said there's no one cap fits all. It really bugs me when you get coaches out there that say, right, just follow what I'll tell you step by step and you're going to be this. There's so many outside forces in influences. So what spare time do you have? What sort of availability to funds do you have? What sort of knowledge do you have? What sort of network do you have? All that accumulate together, mixes up the mixing pot of what sort of strategies you should be taking on and how you should be doing it. But as a generalized rule, if you're a bit younger, for instance, you can be a bit more aggressive, but depending where the market's at also. So in this market at the moment, uncertainty, I probably wouldn't be as aggressive on your refinancing the properties and trying to pull out every single penny. Maybe only refinance them at 70% loan to value, so you give yourself a little bit of buffer for asset price fluctuations. But what you do at the start, though, in a normal market, for example, you would just refinance out as much as you can and interest only to create cash flow, especially if your mission was, I want to be full-time in property and I want to create enough income. So the first stage of it, there's little stages you go through. So stage one is creating enough income. And then when you get to, in the Northeast, in my example, when I got to close to about 20 properties, what I started doing then was going on one repayment mortgage and then one interest only, one repayment and one interest only. But also what I was doing is the one I was buying on a repayment, I was buying and sometimes putting 30% down, as opposed, because now cash flow is not so important to me. I've got credibility to raise private funds, I've got cash flow. So, or I did for a while, the lettings company got me in a bit of trouble. But the theory behind it is this, I can raise deposits elsewhere now as well. So I'm not got to worry about the refurbish thing. So if once you get to about 15, 20 houses, you want to think about deleveraging. So putting some on repayments and putting a little bit more deposit in. If you can, still force the appreciation up a little bit. So you've got a real nice buffer in now. You know, and then the second one you refinance. But then you keep on doing that until you maybe get to 30, 40 houses, and then you just start really deleverage them. You've got enough, you've taken out enough cash flow to pay your wages, pay your lifestyle. So it's about future wealth building. So then you just start deleveraging and putting them all the future ones on repayments, because you've got your cash flow amount here. And for me, depending on what your end goal is, whether you want to sell or whether you want to pass it down to future generations. For me, I want to pass it to my future generation. I'm tax planning to pass it down in a way it'll be some sort of form of trust, so he gains the income from it, but don't gain the control of it and just sell it. And I want it for a legacy going on beyond my son. So for me, I don't mind passing it on with debt, you know. But I feel comfortable about 50 to 60% loan to value. So no matter what happens, if my portfolio, that's where I'm sitting roughly now, probably about 55%, depending on the surveyor. If you've got a bad surveyor on a bad day, you might say 50%. Depending where you are, depending where the market goes. So if you did get some capital growth, I'm happy to leverage it again and keep it around 60%. If I have paid down a load and there's loads of equity in them, I'm happy to leverage it again and keep on buying. But as long as my overall portfolio stays at around 55, 60%, because I want to pass it on to my son, I'm happy to pass it on with debt, because taking it over as a business, taking the business over or in control of that, I'm happy with that. But if you want to, depends on your end goal. But as a general rule, get to so many, create cash flow, then start deleveraging. And if you want to sell and retire on that, then completely deleverage, or if you don't, then just slightly deleverage and keep on building the company.
Okay, so that leads me into my following question. The rental growth, has it stayed the same since you started, or has it picked up?
Picked up little micro pockets of areas. Similar again, there's micro economies up there. So I've got 3 different styles of properties up there. I've got some in the entry level, more not complete entry level, but closer to the entry level. And I don't advise people. I bought a few of them. I got seduced, and also my funds only stretched to them at the start. So them ones, they've not had no appreciation in capital or no appreciation in rent. Some of the other ones in that slightly higher bracket. So what I advise people is a general. This is not a fixed science, but a general thing. If you're thinking of a location, like you say, Hull, if the entry level prices on Rightmove and Zoopla are around £30,000-40,000, you want to just step that little bit up and then maybe look at around £60,000. It's not exact science. You still will get some overpriced properties in bad areas, but then them sort of properties have slight increase, but not much. But again, as I said, you trade it off. What do you want? Do you want capital appreciation and rent appreciation, or do you want good deals that you can force the appreciation and potentially grow with? Depends on your end goal. If you're just happy in your job and you just want a few investments, you might be better off just buying and no hassle of managing refurbs. You're better off probably buying in a more capital appreciation location like Manchester or Liverpool, and then you will get both of them appreciations. You just got to have that. It's just a trade-off of what your end goals and what you want.
Yeah. So what's your investment criteria?
For me, I feel these are general rules. I like a minimum 15% forced depreciation. So after all said and done, I like to have at least 15% uplift in them. Ideally 25%. That seems to be the unicorn and the golden tradish, you know. But if you buy volumes of property, I can promise you won't buy every deal at 25%. You've got to look at the trade-off of sitting on your hands for too long and the opportunity cost of moving forward. But 15% is my minimum. I also like, although I'm going to change this very soon because my goals are going to be very different, but 15% is minimum. I like a minimum 8% yield. I work off a gross yield as a general because where the refurbs are, I say to people, keep it simple, stupid, that KISS analogy. If you're managing a refurb from far away, you don't want to be doing 100, 200K refurb, especially with builders you don't know very well. Builders will go, you will have little mistakes with refurbs or costing, you undercost something. You're better off doing it on a 5 to 10K refurb. If it goes out 10%, then you're £500, £1,000, then you are on a 100K refurb. So that's why I say single lets are the best for cutting their teeth. But 8% yield, because the refurbs are so low, the yield will still, the gross yield will give you an indicator on whether it works. But then that said, look, if I found a property that was a 5% yield, but I knew I could 100% get every single penny of my money out, and it was in an area that maybe had a bit more capital growth, there's always an exception to the rule. But as a general, 15% added capital and an 8% gross yield. Return on capital employed is the figure that everybody should work out, how much money you got left in the deal. I usually like it, on the ones I'm not going to refinance, I like it to be like at least 10%, double figures on returning cash employed. If I'm not going to refinance it, I'll put a little bit extra cash into it, like a larger deposit. But if I'm refinancing it, I'm expecting like anything from 25 to 50% to infinity return on capital. Sometimes you pull all your money out, not very often, but
Yeah, that's good. That's a good, Royce. So, how do you vet people remotely then?
yeah. So again, big thing I do when I'm coaching people is I call it qualify, disqualify. You've really got to qualify and disqualify everybody you use. So whether it's builders, whether it's estate agents, whether it's sourcers, whether it's tenants, you've really just got to have a stringent process. And the power of our results are the power of our questions. So you've really got to have a strong questions to vet people. So an example for a builders you've got to be careful with, because there's such demand. You can't be too demanding at the front end, and if you are, they just go with somebody else and just say, okay, see you later. But what I do is I incrementally build that in. So I ask a few leading questions, build a bit of rapport with them, and I incrementally build it up with my demands, although I'm not demanding, but my demands and my accountability with that. Tenants, we've got a real profile. I've got somebody on the ground that works for me, but I don't really advise people to self-manage from a distance. You can, but remember, there is a trade-off for it. So you've got anything in life's possible. You just got to work out what the trade-offs are for it, you know, and what the risks are, and are the trade-offs worth the risk factor. So for me, when I decided to invest remotely, it was like, I've got not enough money for my next deposit. The bank's not going to ring me again with another loan. So the trade-off for me was, look, I need 13K in total for this. The risk was, if it didn't rent out, I've got to cover my mortgage of £100. I think it was about £130 at the time. The rates was a bit higher, or £140, maybe 150. Let's say 150. I have to cover I have to cover the council tax, £100. So my risk was, okay, the risk is I have to cover $250 a month if it's sat there empty, and maybe I can't sell it. So that's what, and I'm risking is 13K. If I lose this 13K, would I be peed off? 100%. Would I feel a bit embarrassed? 100%. Would it be sore? Yeah, for sure. But would it bankrupt me? Absolutely not. You know, I will live to fight another day. I'll be able to brush myself down. But the upside of it was I could potentially refinance that whole 13K out and buy another house. And I could potentially earn like £250, £300 a month from this. So that's what you've always got to weigh up is the risk for reward factor when you're doing everything's going to come with some sort of level of risk. So I don't advise self-managing. I advise people to get a letting agent, but you've got to qualify, disqualify them. Ask them leading questions. How they hire, how they manage their team, because most people are the recipe of their own undoing. If they're really good and they are the business, what happens is they get loads of recommendations, their business grows, but then they haven't got the systems in place to emulate how good they are. And then they start unraveling, you know? So yeah, just really strong questionnaires, little tests of things for people to do before, like for tenants, for example, they've got a 3-strike rule. They don't answer our reply. That's it. We're not putting you in the house. If you can't answer replies when you want the house, we're not putting you in it. We've got a questionnaire for tenants that we ask them lots of questions, but we also got a leading little thing where we're just we try and manage your expectations. Some tenants might pass a referencing, but they're not what's the word? They're not somebody you want in your property. They're really demanding, and you get a feel from that. You've got certain questions that you ask, and we've got my team that have got the script that they have to ask these questions. So if you get filled and they're going to be an awkward tenant, we just don't want them in there. But if they're going to pass a referencing, they say, well, I've got the money, I can pass, so I'll clear credit. So a little trick at the front end, we just say to them, look, it's already taken this house, but what we'll do is we'll ask your details. And if it don't, it's early stages. If it don't follow through, then we can get back to you. So it leaves you that opening place to just let them down politely without being horrible to them. But if they're really good, you can then say, oh, okay, like you're really good. What we're going to do, we're going to bump you up. It then helps you build rapport with your tenant because they think they're special. You're bumping them up. We don't do it for that reason. We more do it so we can let people down like softly without saying to them, no, we just don't want you. You know, so. Yeah, just make sure you put really stringent processes in.
So do you put this, all of this system, do you give that to your letting agent or do you manage it yourself?
No, I've got my own lettings team, yeah.
Okay.
As I said, that was a mistake. I was busy buying properties and thinking that we could manage it in-house. And I was concentrating too much on the buying part and not on the managing part. I'd read some books, but I didn't put the systems in place strong enough, like all the scripts of when to check them in, the checkpoints of what they need to do to pass the criteria, the checkpoints of what to do when you check them in. We didn't have this all systemized, and it really unraveled me. In 2019, I was nearly bankrupt from it because I was just struggling to keep my head above water with my businesses because I created a massive mess because I wasn't paying attention to that. But yeah, that's why I encourage people, maybe because my pain point. But I encourage people, if they're going to self-manage, make sure you get it really strong systemized from day one. If you're not going to, look, most people get it for passive income. Why do you want to manage tenants? You know, get a letting agent to do it. But you've got to qualify and disqualify them as well. Have a really strong process to make sure they're the right person.
My last question before we go into the fun part. How do you research remotely then?
Our good old friend Google, you know, is so powerful. Good friend, like when I first invested, I wasn't even online, and I went to Southend, and I probably could do better due diligence. So people shouldn't, like it does work in Southend. It could work for somebody, but I just didn't implement it correctly. But you go on Google, you can find fundamentals in all cities of fundamentals: the crime, the schools, the transport links, the employment. You can research all this online, and then the key element is building a profile online. It's really, really key. So your network, I know it's a cheesy saying, but your network is ultimately your net worth. And when you build your presence online, like you found me online, you see me posting, agents found me online, solicitors found me online, builders found me online, and trust and credibility comes with touch points. So the more videos you do, the more you present yourself as credible to the estate agents, to the builders, to other investors in the area. So the critical part of this is building your online presence in a strategical way. Like a lot of people think, okay, I'm just gonna open a Facebook. Every business online today, they see some of their friends try and start a business. They say, yeah, it's all about getting a social media. So they get a Facebook page and Instagram page, and they think that's it. The business is just going to flood towards them, you know, like you've got to make a strategical, and even more importantly than today, maybe Clubhouse has got this organic growth at the moment, but today it's so noisy and the algorithms restrict you so much that you need a strategical plan of why you do that. I recommend everybody starts on Facebook because it's got the communities. So traffic and business is all about the people that are interested in it. So if you want people interested in what you do, rather than you trying to attract them, go and find where they are. And you can find them, like you can find, if you want to invest in Liverpool, there'll be an all about property investing group in Liverpool. So then you go into that group, you give value, you ask questions, you connect with people, you ask them to meet up with people, and you start building a network. But then also you build your value on you document your journey when you're viewing properties, the books you read, the podcasts you listen to. You document everything you do on your actual Facebook business page and mix it in a little bit on your personal page with a little bit about your personal self, so people get a feel for you. And then agents watch this. What you do, you jump on agents' web online things, and you friend request them, and you comment on their posts. And the natural thing of human beings today is they click through on your profile and see what you're up to. And they go, oh, okay, yeah, he's pretty credible, you know. And yes, it's the most powerful element. But even if you're doing that locally, it's a powerful element to do it locally, but definitely from a distance.
Yeah, that's good answer. So now, if you have unlimited funds, who would you have as a mentor?
Who would I have as a mentor? I'd have Russell Brunson at the moment. For where I am in my journey, Russell Brunson. I'm learning marketing. I'm learning online. I'm trying to create my coaching stuff into products that can be delivered digitally. So yeah, it would be Russell Brunson. Maybe close second might be Tony Robbins, but Russell Brunson, I think.
Okay, so one book to recommend to your child, and it doesn't need to be property.
Yeah, Richest Man in Babylon. This is going to be bedtime story. As he gets a bit older, he's 3 years old now. As he gets a bit older, he's getting read that as bedtime stories. Yeah, Richest Man in Babylon.
Great book, great book. One book that every investor should read, and it doesn't need to be a property. It can be whatever.
I think it depends. This is going to be a tiny bit long-winded, but bear with me. Everybody's read Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is one they probably should read as well, but it's not the one I'm going to recommend. But there's four. He said there's 4 different types of investors, and the cash flow quadrant. I guess you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
I've modelled this. There's an investor quadrant. You've got your hands-free investor, your part-time investor, the solopreneur investor, and the entrepreneur investor. Your hands-free is somebody who's got a business, a job, got no interest in property apart from a better return, so they pay somebody to do it for them. Your part-time is somebody who's got a job, don't want to give up their job, love their job, but they still enjoy doing it a bit on the side and want to be a bit involved. Your solopreneur is somebody who's full-time in property, but wants to they're full-time in property, but they are the business. They're not really systemized. They might have an assistant, but the business relies on them. If they went on one of Elon Musk's missions to Mars, if they come back, the business will be there. Where the entrepreneur, he can go on Elon Musk's mission, he can go on holiday for a year because he's systemized it so it can run with or without him. So depending where you're going to go, but I'm going to just say a lot of investors want to get into it, want to be entrepreneurial status. They don't realize there's a trade-off you have to go through, and it takes 5 to 10 years to get it to that stage. But let's say for an entrepreneur investor, because there's all different types, there's different books for different type investors, I would say the email. You know, you really got to understand how to systemize your business, you know, and understand the difference between being a sole trader and the business that you own. You're not really a business if you're reliant on it and being an actual entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's a good book. I read that as well. And one property book then.
One property book. My favorite property book at the moment is a guy I know, is a friend. He's got David Tarns. It's a 1, 2, 3 of property investing. Sorry, I put it on Do Not Disturb. The 1, 2, 3 of property investing. The no nonsense guide to property investing, I think it's called. David Tarns' his name. I can't remember the title. The title's quite long-winded. That's been my favourite recently, especially if you use it a bit more of a beginner stage and getting a bit of an understanding. There's quite a few. I'm enjoying this one at the moment. I interviewed him yesterday as well. Tej Talks.
Yeah,
that's a decent book as well.
Yeah, it was. I read that as well.
Probably one of the most comprehensive ones has been by Rob Dix. As well, useful. And again, sorry, I'm not going to give you one answer here, but it probably helps people a bit more. The Property Investor Secrets by Rob Moore, Mark Homer was good. Yes. So is Rob Dix, How to Be a Landlord. So there's a few there, but my favourite one recently I've read is David Tarns' one, the 1, 2, 3 of property investing.
So Harvey, how can people get in touch with you? Let it out. Everything, email, okay. Even your number. No, but Clubhouse, everything.
Yeah, I'm on Clubhouse every Friday now. So we're doing a room on every Friday, 9:30 on Clubhouse UK time. The place I hang out the most, like one of the things I've done is I've turned all my notifications off on my phone, so I'm not distracted all the time. I check my messages and Messenger. There's so many different platforms now. The one I'm probably in the most is Harvey, Andrew Harvey, on my personal Facebook pages and my Messenger on there. If you want to get the quickest response, that'd be the place, the quickest. But you can find me on Instagram, Harvey Growth Properties, YouTube, Harvey Growth Properties, Facebook business page, Harvey Growth Properties. But the quickest response will be on Messenger, I would say. But I'm on most of the platforms with the URL of Harvey Growth Properties.
Oh, okay, there you have it, listeners. I hope you have taken all of the information that Harvey gave us, and you will go and proceed doing this remotely, because I'm doing it remotely, you can do it remotely, Harvey is doing it remotely. It's just a mindset, like you have said in the podcast. And yeah, of course, you need to have systems. Otherwise, it will all be scattered. So, don't be stressed. Invest, people. Bye.
I love that saying. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on. I've really enjoyed it.